Ladies, gentlemen, everyone, welcome back to the third episode of Lights, Camera, Discussion, LCD podcast. I'm joined here today with Collective Unit and Todorov. Got red on you guys. Welcome. How are we doing?
Morning, good morning. All good? You?
Morning.
Yeah, not too bad, not too bad. So today we're talking about a filmmaker that I believe Todd enjoys very much. Spoilers.
Smidge.
Mr. Martin McDonagh. So we will be discussing all his movies, not the short film, although we may touch on that at points, but his movies: In Bruges, Seven Psychopaths, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri, and The Banshees of Inisherin. Guys, are we excited to talk about Mr. Martin McDonagh?
Yeah, really looking forward to it.
I am.
Good. And that was both in sync as well, so you can tell they're excited. Excellent. I think we shouldn't waste too much time and we just kind of get into it. So Todd, you're going to be the lead for us today, seeing as you're a big fan. So I will hand the reins over to you, sir, and take it away.
Okay, so McDonagh's first feature-length film, was 2008 In Bruges. It's the story of two hitmen. After a job's gone wrong in England, they're sent to Bruges, hide out, and wait for another job. It stars Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. Sorry, lost his name for a second there. With a whole host of other characters that I'm sure we'll talk about. It set the tone for what Martin McDonagh is and what Martin McDonagh does in terms of it being a black comedy. There are some hilarious moments in it. There are some incredibly dark moments in it as well. And like I say, it was the film that kind of pushed on what Martin McDonagh is and what Martin McDonagh does. So first impressions, I know this is a rewatch for all of us, right?
Yep.
Okay, yeah, correct.
We've all seen this before. We'll go, Collie, straight into you. You know, impressions of the film. How do you feel about it?
I mean, like first time I watched it pretty much with the mindset of it being a comedy. And I found it really, really funny. Yeah, there is the dark moments, but like some of the throwaway lines in the comments and the jokes and stuff, I just find absolutely hilarious. Just like even though I didn't know at the time who Martin McDonagh was, apart from being the director of it, like you can kind of tell, and I'm sure we'll analyze this as we talk more about him, like in all his films. But there's certainly like an element of theater playwright kind of esque with the dialogue. And it being focused on the two characters, and then kind of like a play, there's just these characters that appear, and then they appear later on, and there's a lot of cyclical kind of elements to it. But first and foremost, if we're just purely talking about first opinions, I came out like after watching the film, just like sore sides after laughing so much. I think the connection between Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson's class, and I think Colin Farrell really, really stands out here as just a funny guy. Like I know the lines are written for him or whatever, but his delivery in a lot of this is just spot on.
I think that's a big part of it is the chemistry between the two, and like you say, the delivery, because you put lesser actors in there, you put different actors in there, it changes the film completely. Massey, what about you?
Yeah, I mean, the first time I watched this film was I can't remember how old I must have been, but it wasn't long after it came out. I got it on DVD or something, and I don't think I enjoyed it. I remember enjoying it. I don't think I really got it as such, but watching it again this time as like maybe an older, more grizzled sort of movie veteran.
I'm glad you didn't say wiser. As soon as you didn't say wiser, I was going to call that out. But
I would argue I'm a bit wiser than I was as a kid.
True, because you were a fucking idiot as a kid, so yeah, that's fair.
See, but yeah, watch it now as someone who has grown up slightly. I got it a lot more. It's there's such smart, snappy dialogue, and a really sort of like not controversial themes, but sort of things that maybe these days, or even in a lot of films, they aren't even broached. So it's a really kind of brave sort of film as well, and something you can tell that he obviously, with all his films that we'll obviously talk about, he as a writer director obviously has a clear vision of what he wants, and yeah, it's a brilliant film. It's a phenomenal film, absolutely great.
Yeah, so I was introduced to it because I read there's a play by Harold Pinter called The Dumbwaiter, which is about two hitmen who are waiting in a basement, waiting for instructions to come down the dumbwaiter. It's a one-act play. It's a quick thing, and this is like sort of a, I don't know if it's a homage or what, but like it kind of it plays off that idea. And I remember watching this, buying it from Zavvi when Zavvi was like an actual shop, not just people that you order from online and they just throw your order away and hope for the best. But yeah, and like just not seeing anything like it, where like you say, these characters were like. We've discussed this, but I should like just for full disclosure for the episode. We've discussed this a little bit before the episode about like the themes and the ideas and the characters and stuff like that. Just like briefly touched on it, on how like these are not nice people. They're like well, for a start, they're hitmen. They kill people for money. But what you'll see throughout is that like the things that they say, the way they are with each other, they're all out for themselves. Every single person in the film is out for themselves. And I think that gripped me quickly. But I just think, like you say, the way that it's written, how snappy it is, how quick it is, like I could watch it on a loop and not get bored because of how sort of not intense in the sense that, like, for example, when we watch The Lighthouse, that's an intense film. It's a different kind of intensity. But yeah, just how intense and how quick that dialogue is. Any particular moments, like the film's full of it, but any particular moments that stand out for you? Massey, go on. You like? Is there anything that for you that?
Yeah, I mean, and I don't know how to. I don't know what the political term is, if it is little person or whatever, but they obviously call Jimmy the midget during the film, and the whole sequence when they're with the ladies of the night in a room doing drugs and talking about like a civil or like a race war basically, and who's going to be on what side. Like it's such a strange conversation, and again full of moments where you're like, oops, maybe we shouldn't be saying that out loud. You can potentially think that if you wish, but maybe don't say it out loud. But it's just such an interesting, wacky, weird part where they kind of go off on that tangent and talk about things that shouldn't be discussed or should be discussed a bit more tact than they actually do. That for me is obviously one of the stand, again, you said there's quite a lot, but as one of the standout parts for me watching it again.
I think as well, like it's what the film is, because it's this like, obviously it's, if you haven't seen the film, I don't know why we're listening, because like we spoil everything, but like this scene is like fueled by mass amounts of I think it's cocaine and some pills and stuff like that he's lifted off that last, and like it is a case of when you've been around people, and as adults, I'm sure we all have unfortunately been around people who have been off their faces on various substances and things, and people talk shit. Do you know what I mean? So this is them just going off, but it's how the film is, where 1 minute you're laughing at this ridiculous conversation that these two horrendous people are having, and then Brendan Gleeson comes in and shuts the whole thing down about how his wife was black and how she was murdered by a white man. So where does he fall on this race war? And all of a sudden, everything's turned. And like when I say about how intense it is, that for me is like the killer, because I'm there laughing at like this just ridiculous situation, and then all of a sudden we into the serious, and then straight away again, Colin Farrell karate chops Jimmy, and we back to the stupid again. And it's like you don't know where to put yourself. And I struggle a lot with films that are tonally all over the place, that can't find a lane. In Bruges doesn't need to. It swerves between them. But I think because McDonagh writes so well, and obviously that's who we're here to talk about, because he writes so well, it's just so fluid. It just works so well. I lie. There is a decent person in the film. It's the owner of the hotel. Mm-hmm. She is the one redeeming character. I was determined to find one. Collie, any sort of like moments that stood out for you?
I mean, like, I guess it's the cliche moment. It's the moment that a lot of folk know in the film, but it's when he's talking to the Americans about going up the tower, and then the guy's chasing him around the bench and stuff. But my favourite bit's not actually the interaction with the Americans. It's when Brendan Gleeson's character comes down and he's like, "Oh, you won't be wanting to go out there," and they just like go "fuck off" or whatever. And he turns around to Colin Farrell. He's like, "What do you do?" And he's like he just it's the most like iconic like I don't know shrug. It's fucking hilarious. It's like his face is like it's one of my most searched gifs is like shrug, and it's him like with his hands in his pockets of his jacket and stuff. It's fucking
It's so big as well, isn't it?
Like it's spot on. Yeah, like you're talking about like decent characters or like if they're good or they're bad, and you can kind of see that with Brendan Gleeson's character. There is this innate like good in him, even though he's a bad guy and he knows he's a bad guy being a hitman. I was watching some like video analysis of this just for a bit more background and a bit more context, and I think we'll maybe broach the subject of the fact that it's like purgatory momentarily, but one moment that I think was really cool that I didn't catch during my original watches of this, like over the years, but it was only when it was pointed out, is that when he's rejected from the tower because it's €5 or whatever, and he's got €4 something, he's got the coins and he puts them back in his pocket. And then later on, when he's away to chuck himself off the tower, he drops those coins and it's to clear the area so when he lands, he doesn't hit anybody or anything like that. And I just think that, like, I never noticed that at the time. I remember him dropping the coins, and I was just like, "That's a bit like weird to do," or it never really like crossed my mind for a second as to why he was doing it. And then when it was explained in this like analysis for the YouTube video of like, because what that YouTube video was doing was like, there's a lot of foreshadowing in the film, so that is like the foreshadowing of that is him. He's got the coins on him, sort of thing. So it's not so much foreshadowing in terms of like, but it just tells you that he's got coins on him. But another bit that I really like the foreshadowing is when Colin Farrell's character early in the film talks about if somebody comes at you with a bottle, that you've got every right to hit them or whatever. Yeah. And the woman in the restaurant comes out and he goes, "Oh, a bottle," and he fucking absolutely socks her. And it's just like, and then there's the bit with Jimmy with the school uniform. You see him in it earlier, and we'll touch on Harry as a fascinating character, you know. And he's got one of the most iconic lines in cinema, which I'm sure we'll talk about, that he says to his wife. Like he's really, really cool in that. So like there's a lot of moments like throughout the film, but I think and fucking hell, it's hard to say. Like I compare it to Tarantino because I recently watched Pulp Fiction during our time between episodes when we've been rewatching these. I rewatched Pulp Fiction, and like the scenes between Jules and Vincent and the dialogue, it reminds me of the conversations between the two main characters in this. They're just sitting talking about like just stuff. It's like you've got like, you know, a lens and looking in on two guys in a pub, like talking to each other. Like what is it? Colin Farrell's like slagging off him. He's like, when he asks for a specific kind of beer, he's like, "Oh, I'll have a X beer for my ex friend, and I'll have a normal beer because I'm normal." And it's just like, it's just stupid shit like that. That's just, the dialogue is it's not silly in terms of like it undermines the tone of the film, but it's like you say, we were saying, Todd, but like it makes you laugh, and then 2 minutes later they're talking about, "Oh, by the way, like, remember that time that I killed a kid, but, you know, because I shot through a priest," sort of thing. It's the ebbs and flows of the film. It's like the back and forth between like serious and funny, and I think McDonagh toes that line like perfectly. You know, I don't think it's like too funny of a film, and I don't think it's too dark of a film. It's right down the middle, and I don't mean that as in terms of like, you know, it's not straying either side in terms of, because it's wanting to be like down the middle, but you know what I mean. It's just it's a very well balanced film, I think.
Yeah, it lives in both camps like perfectly.
Exactly.
On my limited amount of notes, one of the things that I think I clocked, because I don't think I've ever watched this from like a sort of analysis standpoint. I try not to be too analytical because I think then it takes the fun out of the film. But like, actually, but the one bit of foreshadowing that I've never really clocked before is when Harry, and again, we have to get on to Harry because he's one of my favorite bits of the whole film. But is when Harry rings Ray to say that he has to kill Colin Farrell's character, he sounds surprised almost. Like if the book doesn't stop with him, where does it stop? It stops with me, and he knows he has to kill him. At the beginning, it's one of the first shots of the film when he's up in the tower.
That's right.
And he points and like it does like a sort of, you know what I mean, at Colin Farrell's head. He knows what he's there for. Like he's very aware that this is what's happening. It almost as if it's happened before. going to happen again type thing. And you know, he does have themes, and he does have McDonagh has themes, and it's this, like you say, cyclical. It's this like this never-ending spiral of violence that, like, yeah, Colin Farrell survives this one, but what happens next? Because, you know, you're not going to do a sequel. Don't want a sequel. But I thought that was really cool. Shall we get on to Harry? Because I think that for Ralph Fiennes, for me, he's like
Rafe.
Ray Fiennes. Sorry, Ray Fiennes. He's one of those where I only see him in like we're there, Ray, already.
I was waiting for you to say it because I was like, I don't think he's going to say Rafe properly.
Getting it geared up and ready, right?
I'm sure there was a video or like a conversation with him. I don't even think Fiennes is how you say his last name. I can't even remember what it fully is. But anyway, we'll go with Ralph or Rafe. We'll go with Voldemort. You know what I mean? Like, we'll just call him whatever. The man who shall not be named. But anyway, sorry, Todd. Carry on.
No, he's just one of these like charismatic sort of like whatever role he takes on is. He absolutely runs with it. I'm new to the new James Bond films, like the Daniel Craig ones, and I've only just watched. I think I've got No Time to Die is the only one I've got left to watch. And like for me, his introduction in them was phenomenal. Like he was brilliant. Absolutely. The Grand Budapest Hotel. I know we have some Wes Anderson detractors in the podcast, but again, he is absolutely phenomenal in that film, and I just think. He takes everything that he is, this like brash, loud character, into Harry absolutely perfectly. And like Colin, I don't know if you want to talk about the line. You alluded to it, and I think it's only right.
Well, it's when he's smashing the fuck out of the phone, and his wife's like, Harry, it's an inanimate fucking or an inanimate object, and she's like, you're a fucking inanimate object. And like, it's just like so silly. Like it's just like. It's so overblown, and that's what he brings to a lot of characters, like a lot of like roles that he's in. He doesn't like ham it up like intentionally, but he always tends to make them a bit larger than life, and that's what Harry, I think, is. He's like the prototypical like kind of mob boss, but he's also not, because when you're introduced to him and you spend most of the time, he's at his family home. Mm-hmm. And his wife's in the background as he's like on the phone, like ordering the killing of this guy and stuff. It's just weird. He's like this proper gangster kind of guy in the dialogue with both, like, you know, Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. But then he's a guy in his house, in his home office. It's very funny. One of my fun favorite scenes with him is when he's over there and he's getting the gun. And the guy offers him an Uzi. He's like, "Where am I? Fucking was it South Central Los Angeles or something like that?" It's just silly things like that, and I think it's like such a throwaway line. But I think McDonagh just like there's those ones that like kind of jump off the screen at you, and you're just like, "That's so funny," and I'm gonna remember that. There's quite a lot of quotes that are memorable, especially in this film. Out with the four. I don't know if that's maybe just because I've watched it more than the others, perhaps, but I think there's a lot of like quotes in this that you can just you know say or like reference, and folk will know what you're talking about.
And I think as well, like there's actually a lot, like there is obviously the big quotes in that, but there's a lot of like underlying little things, little like vocal tics or like things as well that are like so they're obviously in the script, but wouldn't like sort of like be like these massive parts. Like even things like you were talking about, obviously when he goes to pick up the gun, there's a guy that had his eye blown out by the blank, and the first thing Harry says to him is "aye." It's just like just little things like that. They're like funny. So good, and are just again like perfectly tonal wise again for this film that doesn't have a set tone as such, but it just works phenomenally within the whole the grand scheme of things and with the character of Harry.
There's one like there's one conversation that Harry has with Brendan Gleeson that made me laugh, so I made sure I took a note of it properly. It's like, Harry, let's face it, and I'm not being funny, I mean no disrespect, but you're a cunt. You're a cunt now, and you've always been a cunt, and the only thing that's going to change is that you're going to be an even bigger cunt, maybe even have some more cunt kids. And he fucking loses it. He's like, leave my kids fucking out of it. What have they done? You fucking retract that bit about my cunt fucking kids. I retract that bit about your cunt fucking kids. Insult my fucking kids. That's going overboard, mate. I retracted it, didn't I? It's so like ridiculous. Like this is the conversation they're having, like in a tower, over Bruges and that. It's just, that for me is like the film in a nutshell. It's just fun, like dark dialogue between two characters. It's absolutely spot on. So I made sure that I copied and pasted that to the limited notes that I've got, because just word for word, it's just funny. I think it's maybe just because the C word's in it loads, to be honest. But yeah, sorry Todd, you were about to say before.
No, it works, and it like I was just going back to the lad who's blinded. I can't remember his name, but like you say, that the limited interaction that they have, Harry and the blinded lad, when he shouts up to the tower and he says his name, he says, "Oh, it's such and such," and Harry goes, "The blind boy," and the lad at the bottom kind of like goes, "Yeah," like he's so belittled by Harry. It's just perfect, and it like obviously that's again. So there we've got like I just burst out crying, laughing at that line just because it's so stupid. Then all of a sudden you've got Harry dropping Ken and absolutely like tan-assing it down the stairs, making sure that like you can get down because Ray's downstairs, and it's that sort of like, again, just flip every time, flip over, funny, then it's serious, then it's funny, then it's serious. I think it's worth talking about the end. I know like we all over the place, but you referenced the Jimmy in the school uniform because he's making the film and stuff. And what Harry says earlier in the film is, if I shot a kid, I'd put a gun in my mouth and I'd shoot myself. I'd kill myself right on the fucking spot. And, then when he's chasing Ray down, he shoots Ray, the bullets go through Ray and he ends up killing, or Miss Ray ends up killing Jimmy. He thinks it's a little kid, puts the gun in his mouth, blows his own head off. There has been criticism of that. And this was like one of the first criticisms I'd heard, where somebody had said, that's McDonagh thinking he's really clever. And I don't think it's clever. Like, it's clever. It's a really good way to end the film and stuff, and to end that sort of pursuit. I don't know if you have any feelings about it. I just thought it was interesting. Every time I watch the film, that stuck with me. Do you know what I mean? That's something that sort of replayed in my head. And maybe it's because I'm card carrying McDonagh fanboy type thing. But like, I was like, no, it's a good ending, and I just didn't know whether there was like how you felt about it. I don't know if it's.
I think
I like it. I like it as an end. Massey, you can speak on it first.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say again. It's kind of the whole theme, or what McDonagh does is like like we're saying, the cyclical sort of things where stuff like that is always pretty much gonna happen. But it also shows well like Harry's like almost twisted sense of morality as well. Where like killing anyone's absolutely fine, or if you have, as a boss of hitmen, but when it comes to a certain demographic, that's a no-no. Like that's literally the worst thing you could do when you're taking someone else's life. So I like that. I thought it was a really interesting, clever way of ending it. I don't know about you, Collie.
It's very interesting because like it's his word, and this is what he says, that if I killed a kid, I would just kill myself and stuff like that. So it's just like the instantaneous thing of like, he looks like he's killed a kid, and he just turns around and just instantly does it. When I first watched the film, I was shocked by it because obviously there's like, you quickly realize that he's killed Jimmy, and then you're like, shit, he's in a school uniform, and then it just essentially it cuts to him, and he just does it then and there. There's no hesitation, so it's quite a shocking ending. But I think it fits perfectly. It bookends the film perfectly, and then you've got obviously the kind of monologue from Colin Farrell as he's being carried away on the stretcher and speculating, about hell and if there's a hell and it's an eternity in the city of Bruges, and yeah, it's I think it's perfect because like right at the start of the film he's talking about what does he say again? He's like, I don't even know where Bruges is, and then he pauses. He's like, it's in Belgium. He's just like detracted on Bruges like constantly throughout the film. So I think like start to finish, him talking about Bruges is perfect. And then encapsulated within the film is these like this twisted kind of code, I guess, that the hitmen have, which is, if you like, Harry's code is like, if you kill a kid, you have to kill yourself, sort of thing. So he lives and dies by it. At the end of the day, he doesn't think about his wife and his kids at home. He's just like, well, if I've said that somebody has to do it, then I guess like I have to do it. And I don't even think he has that, well, I guess I have to do it thing. He's just like, oh, I killed a kid. Boom. That's it. Like, sort of thing. It's definitely shocking, but I've never thought it was like a cheap ending to the film, or if it was like anything unexpected. I think like the whole film sets up not just like tonally for like the foreshadowing and stuff, but like we said right at the start there, Todd, was like there's no good people in this, and if anything, like sticking to your code, if you can perceive that as good, then I guess even Harry redeems himself somewhat towards the end. There is that he stands by his his word and his thought process of what he was expecting Colin Farrell's character to have done. He's like, well, if I'm asking, or if I'm telling somebody that they should have done it, then I have to do it,
Mm-hmm. Yeah, the book stops with him. If it doesn't stop with, the book stops with
absolutely.
him. And I think, again, like the idea of like cyclical violence, the other thing is coincidences. Like, as in, when we go through the films, I think a lot of what we see is there's like these dark coincidences. So like Harry saying, if you kill a kid, you kill yourself, and it happens. And I think when we look at like Three Billboards, especially, there's like these sort of like these foreshadowing moments where a lot of people would go like, you wouldn't say that, but this is like slice of life sort of stuff. Do you know what I mean? It's literally we're looking in on these people's lives, and I think people would say horrendous things. I don't know. I think it's an interesting way of framing it. Is there any other sort of like big things? I know we've touched briefly on the tower, but for me, that's like I get not like emotional as in it's not something that makes me cry. It's not. I just sort of like I get taken aback. I'm silent in it, and I think just because it takes that time where obviously he's dropping the coins and we see everybody. Um, there's that shot of him stood in the window before he jumps. And I know we're met with the shock and sort of like the fall of the camera and then him hitting the floor and them talking to each other. But like just that moment where he stood in the window frame, absolutely, like it just blows me away every time. And I think a lot of what I've read and seen after I've watched them again is that people say that it's not these films aren't particularly well shot. And I think there's times where I think they're stunning films, like just to look at as an image. And I think that shot there is one of those times, one of those moments. Yeah, I don't know if there's any other moments that like stood out for you that you wanted to talk about. That you wanted
to. Not particularly. There was one like I was trying to be sort of fair as well about this because I knew that this would be like a absolute like would be
love fest.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was trying to think of things that like I was like maybe a bit like I don't know. And again, this is just something it's sort of minor, but like I don't know what you guys thought about the score. The score sort of took me out of it a little bit. It felt kind of cheap and like garage band, like on like the Mac, like garage band-esque sort of thing. Right. That was probably the only thing I would say that I was like, I don't know. Did that? I don't know if it could have just been me being pernickety. I don't know if you guys had any thoughts about that or.
5-star film. It's perfect.
Okay,
so
perfect.
Nice. No, I'm joking. Like, if I'm honest, aside from like the last song where he's up in the, and I know that's not the score, but like in terms of the music and the sound in general, aside from little bits of sort of classical and that the Irish folk song at the end, honestly I couldn't tell you, and I don't know if that's me just sort of like I've watched it that many times now, it just sort of
blends in.
Or whether it is sort of unremarkable. Do you know what I mean? As in, like it isn't great. So I wish that's something now I'm gonna have to like sort of. I'll have to rewatch it again today, which is going to be a part of me. What a chore. But yeah, like as far as I don't have anything to say about it, just because, and like hopefully it's just because it's blended in watching it so many times over the years.
Colin, I don't know if you noticed, or I mean, if I'm being super critical, feel free to tell me because
Well, I mean, there's nothing like kind of similar to what Todd's saying. I don't know if it's just part of the film now, and it kind of zone out of it because it doesn't stand out, sort of thing. But it's never stood out to me like negatively, or it doesn't take me out of it or anything like that. So no, I mean, I've got no. I'm not going to turn around and say, "Oh my god, the score's amazing" either. It's just, I guess, it's just in the background, which sometimes you want a score to be. A score doesn't ever like doesn't necessarily have to be a focal point of a film. But similar to Todd, I'll have to like rewatch it at some point, not today, but at some point. With that thinking, behind it, just trying to pay attention to it, because whenever I've heard it, I'm not or when I'm trying to think of like certain points in the film where I've noticed the music, I've always felt like it fitted or whatever. But no, it's interesting. That's why we do this, is to don't always have to agree and have a love in and all that kind of stuff. We can see things differently, or we can raise different points. So no, I'll have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, I don't know if there's anything else. I could talk about this film and like moment by moment for days, like we said, but I don't want to sort of take over and be here for 4.5 hours. Do you know what I mean? I don't think we've got the time. We've got lives and stuff. But like,
what we can do is we can talk about like all these things like just quickly, or like for as part of the episode, and then when we're finished, me and Coyle leave, and you can just talk to yourself about like the films like for 4.5 hours.
So it'll be like recording run.
Yeah,
it'll be like a special edition episode for anybody who gives a shit. Which will the most niche episode. Yeah, just me listening back to myself going, yes, absolutely, yeah. Just on the last thing I'll say about it is that I think it's my favorite McDonagh film, and I don't think that'll change. It's something that I watch on a not regular daily, but a regular basis. It'll be once a month I'll stick this on, and it's sort of become a weird comfort film for me. And I don't know, like it's one of those that sort of doesn't match the phrase comfort film, but certainly falls into the bracket. And I just think, it's one of those. Like I say, I could go on about forever, but I think we'll leave it there. If that's
fair enough.
Yeah, come in. Right, so we'll move on to McDonagh's second film, which is 2012's Seven Psychopaths. So it's billed as a comedy crime film. And again, it's got all of the dark dark edges, but I think this one feels a lot more mainstream than the other films. I don't know. We'll talk about that a little bit, and I think it's because it had the budget behind it after the success of In Bruges. Basically, it is about Marty, played by Colin Farrell, who is a writer who is trying to write his latest screenplay, Seven Psychopaths. He's determined to write this film about 7 different psychopaths. The problem is he has a Quaker psychopath, a Buddha psychopath, and he just can't seem to find it. So he enlists the help of his friend Marty, played by the incredible Sam Rockwell. Again, no real spoilers, but Billy, played by Sam Rockwell, and who drags his friend Christopher Walken along. And through that, they get embroiled in different crimes as they sort of find the psychopaths around them. The psychopaths. Was it the friends of the psychopaths? No, the psychopaths are the friends that we made along the way. I'm going to shut up. Massey, again, is this a rewatch for everybody, or is it?
Yes.
Yeah, I think so. So this is one where I think I watched it when it like sort of first came out, and again I was a bit younger, maybe wasn't as tuned into it as I thought. But there's things I remember. So I'm counting it as a rewatch, but I think it was a rewatch. I didn't have Letterboxd back in that day, so
you can't tell.
So I can't tell.
Well, Massey, we'll come to you first. Just if it's sort of the most fresh for you. First impressions, how do you feel about the film?
Yeah, definitely. It 100% feels the most mainstream. It's definitely the most sort of meta as well. With a lot of the stuff, it's about a screenwriter, but to me, it felt a lot like a sort of Tarantino film. We're kind of talking about how there's sort of like the kind of the feelings with that, with the writing in Bruges, but this felt more like a Tarantino, the way it like kind of cuts away to like the different psychopaths and different stories and that sort of thing. It's quite a shocking film as well. It kind of loses its way, the third act sort of thing. I think the first it was really stronger at the start, and it started to kind of lose me a little bit. But again, it's a very good film. I'm not going to say it isn't. But for me, it's probably his weakest film, in my eyes. So yeah.
Colin?
So I like this film. Don't get me wrong, but I think it's like it's kind of harking back to our first episode with Damien Chazelle and Babylon and that. It's surprising to me that it's his second film, but I think it just disappears up its own ass a little bit at times. I think it tries too hard to be, this kind of multiple thread, like, snaking between each other for the whole film, and then there's a culmination at the end. Maybe I'm just too stupid to follow the threads and stuff like that, but I find it a little bit too jumbled of a film. Story-wise or like dialogue-wise, dialogue-wise it's strong, but I'm saying like story-wise, I just find it to be a bit too much for me. Individual like performances are top tier. Like, don't get me wrong. I just think the film tries a little bit too hard to. I never really considered it as a Tarantino thing, but it's probably a good point there for Massey. Similar thoughts to me. It's like it tries to be a Tarantino film, but only he can really pull that off. So I think it just falls short a little bit story wise for me. Echoing your thoughts as well. Out of the four of them, it's definitely like well below the other three for me. Don't get me wrong, like, it's a film that I would recommend people do check out because it's good in parts. But yeah, it's just I don't dislike it. I did start my review there saying I did like it, and I do like it. But it's just I think it's a massive step down compared to where he comes back up, especially to like Three Billboards and then Banshees. It's definitely a massive dip for me personally. Todd, do you want to talk on it?
Yeah, so again, it should come as no surprise. I love it, and I think I get hooked on the dialogue in particular. Like, as in, there are moments in this film, and again, we'll get to them. Where Billy is proposing his shootout, where he's got the script and he's sat. I don't do a karaoke, as in I'm not stood in front of a bar full of people talking along with it, but I'll watch that scene and actively talk along with it because it just makes me feel, I don't know, good. I can't describe it, but
now, do you say talk along with it? Do you just chat shit along with it, or do you actually know like the words and the script and that?
I feel like I know most of it. Yeah,
Okay, fair.
and like, yeah. And like, but again, that's all because of Sam Rockwell. I don't think it's like I can see that being that McDonagh's gone for most of the script. Look, this is what I want, and I think in this film in particular, there's moments where I feel like that shines more than anything. But that feels like a Sam Rockwell largely improvised scene. I don't know. I try not to research too much into it because I don't want things to like influence what I'm saying and how I feel about it. But it feels like a lot of it is him, just like him saying, and he throws his fucking nunchuckers. Like, that felt like a Sam Rockwell-ism rather than, do you know what I mean? And then Colin Farrell responded to it. Yeah, I get that it's disjointed, and I appreciate that. The way that I see it is that, like, because Colin Farrell's character, Marty, is writing this screenplay and it's not finished, and it's, we're on this sort of like meandering kind of, thoughts coming in from all over the place, dragging bits in. Does that work? No, it doesn't. Does that work? Oh, like the thing with the Vietnamese priest. Again, we go back to the Vietnamese. Like, I know we didn't mention it from In Bruges, but he's got some obsession with the
That'd
Vietnamese.
be on their side.
Yeah. Doesn't help just saying Vietnamese. But yeah, like over and over again, like these little weird threads, like say, come in the bits of story, and for me, it's one of those films that I've watched on loop, and I think in particular these two, Billboards and Banshees are slowly becoming that, but In Bruges and Seven Psychopaths are like the first ones that had on DVD and Blu-ray, and if you could wear DVDs out, I'm sure my copies would have been by now. So why don't we? Because I think it's big for this. Go performances first. Aside from Colin Farrell's eyebrows, where else are we looking? Like, who else like really stood out? But yeah, in this one,
Sam Rockwell. I mean, like, the guy must be one of the best secondary like, supporting actors in the business. I don't think there's anybody better than him at it. On a quick tangent, I've watched what's the film? I talked to you about it. It's got Ben Foster in it and Chris Pine and stuff. I watched it recently.
Hell or High Water.
Hell or High Water. And I was thinking like Ben Foster is up there in terms of like one of the best supporting actors out there, but like Sam Rockwell for me is like the guy. I wouldn't envisage him ever like leading a film per se, but well, apart from Moon, very good in Moon. But in this, I think it's like the S tier of Sam Rockwell performances. He's allowing as a character and as an actor to like for it to be Colin Farrell's story and film, but he pretty much steals the show as well. He's over the top while being understated. His delivery of dialogue is just unbelievable. A standout scene that you mentioned, Todd, is when he's going through his version of the shootout and how he would do things. And I mean, him and Christopher Walken together are just perfect.
Mm-hmm.
Like two guys who've got very like distinct like accents, voices, speed of delivery, and all that. And it's just like them bouncing off each other's just amazing casting, I think. By McDonagh at least. So for me, Rockwell's like the standout of the whole film, personally.
Yeah.
Yep.
Just Massey.
No, I was just going to say I completely agree. Like, see with Christopher Walken, right? I don't think I get him. Everything I've seen him in, and like the whole like his the way he talks and stuff, and the way people kind of do the impressions of him and stuff, I don't get it. I like he's fine. He's absolutely fine. But as a larger scale thing, I'm just like. I'm not on board the walking train. But yeah, I just don't. Again, I get that he's a complete legend. I get that he's done some fantastic films. I've not seen things like is Deer Hunter he's in, isn't he, with De Niro, right? I've never seen that. So like the classics and stuff I've not seen, but I don't really get him, to be honest.
I think for me, it's like. It's a sort of a Danny DeVito style. Like how I feel about Danny DeVito is not to the extent of Danny DeVito, but how I feel about Christopher Walken. Like he's been such a mainstay in like things that I've seen throughout, and he's such an endearing person anyway. Like I think that lends itself to him. But I just think like his characters always have, because of who he is and how he acts, have that like just a strange quality that
just kooky. They're just like kookiness about them. Yeah,
can't put your finger on it. Like the way he says it's a cravat, but he doesn't. He says it like almost with a lisp. He's like it's a cravat. Like I don't know. It just there's just something about him that I want to watch and that I could listen to. And again in this film, I think it was Percy last night who was saying about when he goes, put the gun down. And, no, I don't want. And it just the way he says no and that inflection. Yeah. But we all know about Foo Fighters.
The Foo Fighters.
If you haven't seen the video, please just look for Christopher.
Do you know what we're talking about, Massive? We talked about
that SNL or something like that, wasn't it?
Yeah, SNL. Yeah, Dave Grohl's saying that Christopher Walken was introducing him, and he came over and he was like, where's the accent? Is it on Foo or Fighters? And he's like, oh, it's actually on. It's actually on Fighters. Right. And Dave Grohl does a better Christopher Walken impression than Christopher Walken. It's unbelievable. Ladies and gentlemen, the Foo Fighters. And they show the clip at the end of it. It's fucking spot on. Just on the Walken thing, like, yeah, I'm kind of the same. I've only seen him in a couple of things. Like, I've not seen too much of it. I've seen him in Deer Hunter. But for me, my favorite performance of his is he's Leo's dad in Catch Me If You Can. And I think that is unbelievable. Like I'm sure one day we'll cover Spielberg and that, and obviously if we pick and choose films, that's definitely one that I want to review or not review, but talk about and stuff. Mm-hmm. I think he's class in that. But he's like one of a kind. He's genuinely one of a kind. Whether that's like just his presence and his delivery of his lines and his accent and stuff. Like I did like him in here. The only I think it's more of a character thing rather than like a thing against him, but. Just like when he reveals that it's him that's got like the cut throat and stuff like that. I remember when I first watched it, I was just like, oh, like really? Like I don't know. I just found it like as much as maybe Todd, that when people are saying the ending of In Bruges is a bit like it takes them out of it, or it's a bit cheap or whatever, I feel that reveal for me is a bit like I can understand where we've went on the story and stuff, and like fair enough, but I don't know. I just found it a bit, that took me out of it, and even went on like rewatching it a couple of times for this. Every time I knew it was coming up, and I was just like, oh, like I obviously I couldn't fucking write anything better, you know what I mean? But like I don't know, just for me, it feels like something a lesser writer would do, if that makes sense.
Mhm.
And that's how high of a regard I hold McDonagh, is that I think like it feels like something that somebody who's trying to do a film like him would do almost. And I feel that kind of maybe overall of the film, like fair enough, it's got all the actors that he works with multiple times, like Farrell, Rockwell, Harrelson, stuff like that. I feel like it's at times it's like a homage, or not even a homage, because that's probably a bit irrespectful, but like almost a rip-off of McDonagh. It's like, what would you do if you were trying to make a McDonagh film? Maybe that's a bit harsh, but that's how I felt sometimes with the film. It was trying to be a McDonagh film a bit too much, almost.
I'd agree with that, definitely.
It does feel like a studio film, like, you know, when we're saying about it being mainstream.
Yeah, I agree.
And I think maybe those twists and turns and like those big reveals are sort of the things where you're like, oh, you know, has he put that in there to appeal to, let's be the most McDonagh, do you know what I mean? And then you end up
possibly,
being
crank up to 11 kind of thing, quite possibly.
Yeah,
that's a very valid point.
But then if in that case, if that's happened and it's taken people out of it, then do you know what I mean? That shouldn't happen.
I think like it was well received, this, by critics and stuff, and by everyone. I think when reading reviews, so that's against kind of where I am with it. And again, I'm never going to say it's a shit film. I do enjoy it. I will watch it. You know, if I come across it like on Netflix, like it comes up with like watch now kind of thing, or recommended for you again, I'll definitely watch it over and over. But it just kind of, I think he course corrects magnificently with the next two films that we're going to move on to. I think like for me, again, coming back to my point about Chazelle, he just disappears up his own bum a little bit here. Whether that's to appease a studio, or whether that's just how he feels like he wants to move, because at the end of the day, it's his career. You know what I mean? Who am I to judge? But I feel whether that's his decision or not, I think he goes back to his roots with the next two films, whereas this is a bit more overblown, or like a bit bigger than his other films. It's exactly what we were saying right at the beginning, is that it's a studio film. It's the big budget. Maybe he felt like he had to do it like this, mainstream. Maybe he just felt like he had to do it like this.
Mm-hmm.
Just to go back to back to Rockwell. You know, when we were saying about like, you know, the improvisation, or what feels like an improvisation. If it wasn't, it was perfectly delivered. Have you noticed the amount of repetition that there is in the dialogue? Like in all of the films, it seems like there's certain lines. So in Bruges, Colin Farrell says, "Here in Bruges," and like, you know, he's like, Brendan Gleeson goes, "Yeah," he goes, "Here in Bruges," and then Sam Rockwell. But the beauty of it is Sam Rockwell's delivery is so good, and he gets the lines pitch perfect every time. I wrote, "Well, call her up and see," and it's where he said that he's called her a bitch. In the like, Colin Farrell wakes up in the morning, like, yeah, you know, you're here because you called your wife a bitch or whatever, and he's like, "Oh, I wouldn't have done that," and he goes, "Well, call her up and see," and then Colin Farrell goes, "What?" And he goes, "Well, call her up and see," and it's like, it's almost like somebody's copied and pasted the exact line. Like it just, and that's the beauty of Rockwell. The other one that I have to mention, just in terms of lines, and it's probably my favorite in the film, is when they talk after that phone call, and they laid in the place where all the dogs are, and they're talking about Marty's alcoholism. And he's like, "You fuck from birth. The Spanish have got bullfighting. The French have got cheese." And then he gets all the dog, and he's like, "And the Irish have got alcoholism." And then Colin Farrell's like, "And what have the Americans got?" And like, deadpan as fuck. Sam Rockwell looks at him and goes, "Tolerance." Like that for me is the best fucking thing. Like it just gets me every single time.
Yeah. Sorry, just quick shout as well to the scene, the shootout scene. Shout out to Abby Cornish as well. Just Throw it in
Fucking
there.
relax, Jesus
Yeah.
Christ.
You know, we have a tone.
Oh, fucking cheap
Somebody's
stuff,
ruining it.
Funny, actually, back to actual analysis of the film and not just.
Massey being a wrong.
I was
I'm being a horn
analysing the
dog.
film. How dare you? 2 points the film was analysing.
She's very good in Jack Ryan, actually.
Yeah, she is.
Yeah, she's very good in that. So this was just in looking through like some trivia notes, is that Mickey Rourke was actually cast in the role that Woody Harrelson ended up taking, and apparently he disagreed with McDonagh and called him a jerk off. was what happened. And then McDonagh just said, "I was fine with Mickey." It was he said, "I was fine with it. Mickey's a great actor. I've known Woody for years and years, and he was a perfect choice for this too."
And there's a moment in the a moment in the shootout where when Sam Rockwell's shooting, there's a gravestone with your Rourke on it as well.
Is there?
Yeah.
Oh no way! Didn't clock that.
I didn't know that. That's class. I can't imagine this film with Mickey Rourke in it instead of Harrelson. You know.
Nah. But and then it puts on like the trajectory for 3 Billboards, and again we'll get to it because we're going to talk about it. But like Harrelson's one of the strongest bits in an incredibly strong film for 3 Billboards. What if Rourke had taken that role? What happens if Rourke was in 7 Psychopaths? Where'd you go down that line? Because I can't see Mickey Rourke being in 7 Psychopaths. I like him, you know, especially like I haven't seen a lot of him, but like his more recent stuff, The Wrestler and Sin City and stuff. But like, what he wouldn't fit in 3 Billboards. It would not work in any way, shape, or form. And then where does that lead?
I agree. I think like back to the studio thing. I think that was maybe almost a studio recommendation, or like they pushed for him, because that was the rest. I'm just looking at Rourke's filmography here. Like Sin City 2005 was him kind of coming back a little bit, and then it was kind of The Wrestler, Iron Man 2 over the next couple of years, and then 2012 was 7 Psychopaths. So that was probably like part of his like, you know, Rourke-assance, I guess, if they've got a McConaissance or Rourke-assance, him coming back kind of thing. Like it was probably the studio seeing him as like a guy that like pushing that, seeing him as a guy that a lot of people have seen him in a lot of films like Marvel, and Wrestler was like huge, obviously, like award nominated film and all that kind of stuff. Let's get a big guy in that, because Woody Harrelson, as great as he is, like he's not. He's a household name. He's a household name, but he's not like that S tier of actor, which Mickey Rourke isn't either. But you know what I mean? That they probably seen Mickey Rourke as a bigger draw than
at that time
than Woody Harrelson, you know, 10, 11 years ago.
Yeah.
So I can understand that maybe talks to the studio involvement, I guess you could say. And that's not based on anything. I've never read anything about McDonagh being like studio force this, because you know it was a well received film. Like I say, it was just, for me, it's just a bit discombobulated a little bit. I don't know. It's just, it stands out of the 4 films negatively to me, or not negatively, but like it stands out as a lesser film for me, and maybe it's just too different to the other ones.
Definitely. Just quickly as well, what do you guys think of Tom Waits in that role? His little cameo.
I liked him. I thought it was fine. Yeah,
I love Tom Waits.
I did see. I did see on the IMDb, I've got noted here, Tom Waits, an animal lover, agreed to the role without reading the script. Upon hearing you would be surrounded by rabbits. So I thought it was good.
That the little I know it, like it wasn't all Tom Waits. I know it was your man who's in 3 Billboards as well. But that little vignette of like the serial killers, I don't know. That was, I really enjoyed that. Yeah, loved that. I thought it was just like a nice, like it was just a cool little sort of like, he could have just explained that. He could have just said, we go around killing serial killers, boom, on to the next one.
See, that was kind of as well what made me think of the Tarantino influence, because it's kind of the alternate history sort of side of it. They're going around killing, like, well, the Zodiac killer and all that sort of stuff as well.
Yeah,
that's what kind of that was sort of the Tarantino or things that I sort of saw with that.
Yeah. So I'm with you. I do think it's the weakest out, and like I say, love it, but it is the weakest out of the 4. I don't think there's anything else to sort of cover, because once for me, Colin Farrell is good in this film. I love Colin Farrell, but I don't think with what he does in Bruges and what he does in Banshees, it's not comparable. Like I do think he's sort of dragged along by these because Woody Harrelson's a bigger version of himself in this film. Woody Harrelson almost feels camp. Is the way that I would describe him in this film. I think there's a level of campness to him.
Speaking on Woody Harrelson, I think he plays a lot of characters like that, though. I think for me, I think that's a lot of his acting style is that kind of. I don't know. It's just it's the opposite of Woody almost, but I think he for me, when you look at quite a lot of his roles, there's somewhat of a bit of like flair or flamboyancy about him. Even in the small part of that he's got in No Country for Old Men, when he's got the conversations with Javier Bardem and that, like I think a lot of whether it's a bit part or whether it's a bigger part and stuff, and we'll obviously move on to him in Three Billboards in a minute, but I think that's his style, and I really like that about him. I think he's a fantastic actor, and but I will agree here, he turns it up, just that a little bit. And I agree with the Colin Farrell point that Colin Farrell's really good in this. Like, don't get me wrong, but back to what you were asking about, like, who else stands out for you? Like, Rockwell just steals the show for me. Like,
100%, definitely.
The guy's unbelievable.
Yeah, and again, I think you could talk about just his like moments, like him watching watching the flag. When Colin Farrell's reading his diary, and he's like saying, "My neighbour has the right to fly a flag. Don't set it alight." And then like it's just him like just absolutely zoned out staring at the flag. And Colin Farrell looks at the flag and it's like half burned and stuff. Like just bits like that. I don't think you get a similar actor. And I know we're saying about leads, and I'm with you. I do think he plays the sort of the supporting character better. But have you seen Mr. Right? Just on a brief note, it's a very easy watch, but a household favourite yet, and it's Sam Rockwell plays an assassin who is incredibly skilled and falls in love with Anna Kendrick, who is always fantastic. And it's Tim Roth as well. It's honestly, it's a 90-minute, stick it on. It's just a recommendation. It's not anything groundbreaking. It's not winning any awards, but it's an amazing film. So just, give it a look.
Is that an old film? Is it an early film?
2015. I just found it on IMDb.
Oh, okay. I'll have to. I wasn't even aware of it. Must have passed me by.
I think we watched it on a sort of, it's Sam Rockwell, let's stick it on and see what happens type thing. But yeah, it's just a little recommendation. And I know obviously with it being the weaker of the four, I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on, anything else you want to talk about with Seven Psychopaths?
I did. Yeah, the one thing was I thought Olga, Kurylenko maybe, as the girlfriend of multiple characters, we'll just say. I've always got like a bee in my bonnet, I guess, about her because she's in Quantum of Solace, and I hate that film. Like, I don't hate that film. It annoys me, that film, and she's an annoying part of that film. So I've always kind of got like, ooh, like, kind of. I don't like it when she's in a film. I don't like her. I don't like her. Right, I'll just state it. I don't rate her. I don't like her. But I thought she was good. I thought she was good in this for the little part that she had. I thought she was decent in this. Just even like, I don't know, just arguing with Billy and stuff like that, I thought was good. But again, that's just Sam Rockwell, I think, dragging people along with him.
Yeah.
But no, I've got nothing else to say. I'm happy to move on.
Yeah, Massey.
Yeah, I'm good to go on. Yeah.
We did discuss briefly, and like we say, if you listen to this, the likelihood is you've seen these films. But obviously, with Three Billboards, it's a heavy film with some heavy themes, and when I'm talking about the synopsis, we'll go straight into it. So just as a heads up for everybody, that's where we're at with Three Billboards. So 2017 was Martin McDonagh's third feature film, Three Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. And it's the story of Mildred Hayes, who, after the rape and murder of a daughter, decides to, try and reinvigorate the case to find her daughter's killer by putting up three massive billboards outside of the town of Ebbing, Missouri, where it's asking the chief of police, Willoughby, played by Woody Harrelson. Oh, sorry, I should have said as well, Mildred, played incredibly by Frances McDormand. encouraging Chief Willoughby to kind of get his arse in gear and try and find out who murdered the daughter. It's, again, there are some amazing comedic moments. For my money, one of the best shot Martin McDonagh films in terms of how it looks. Dark moments, hilarious moments, incredible performances. So again, rewatches for everybody.
Yep.
Yeah. So Collie, we'll come to you first. First impressions of Three Billboards.
Yeah, I went in like not knowing anything about this film apart from who was in it and who it was by, and I was blown away by it. I think it's the most adult, I think, of McDonagh's films. It's obviously tackling a lot of serious topics. There's a lot of triggering, I guess you could say, language in it concerning the crime around and Frances McDormand's daughter and that. But I think just the writing of the dialogue and the performances just make this film like an S-tier film. I absolutely love this film, and I was really chuffed to be able to rewatch it a few times because I'd left it a little while since I'd last watched it because I didn't want to like burn myself out on it, because I remember when I first seen it, I watched it a couple of times immediately thereafter, and then it's been semi-regular watch for myself. So it'd been a couple of months, I think, since I'd seen it. So yeah, I absolutely love it. I think from top to bottom, the performances are great, all the way to like Peter Dinklage. I thought he was really good in this, and I'm sure we'll go through all the characters, but just all the little relationships and the little kind of spiderweb relationships between all the characters. I love this film. I think it's fantastic. Massey?
Yeah, I completely echo your sentiments. It's a heavy film. It's quite tiring watching it, but it's unbelievable. Like as you say, the performances. McDonagh seems to get. Obviously has these actors and actresses that are very good, but he seems to get something out of them that is just like transcends what they normally do. So yeah, phenomenal film. So on Letterboxd, I didn't rate it 5 stars, but like the more like I think about it, and I've watched it twice. That's the second time watching it. Like it's the closest thing to 5 stars I'll get without it being a 5-star film. I think it's just the heaviness of it maybe that doesn't allow me to get it over the line. But yeah, phenomenal film.
Yeah, this was the first one that I got to see in the cinema. Like the first McDonagh film I got to see in the cinema. And just remember being step by step blown away by. Again, it keeps that sharpness of the dialogue, but it almost feels a little bit more human and a little bit less of a play. Like you say about In Bruges feeling like a play, and I do think some of that carries over to Seven Psychopaths. This feels a little bit more human. It's the only way I can describe it. And I think that comes with some trappings, like some of the language that people use about other people, even seemingly caring characters like use horrible language about people, open to use it. But it just felt real, and I think that was something. And again, when I first watched it, and we will get to the ending, I was left a little bit frustrated by it, and it was only on a rewatch where I was like, do you know what? That's a fucking perfect, like, that is the perfect way to start and finish that film. Just again because of the themes that it has, and we'll get to that. But yeah, for me, it was one of those films that like cinema experiences you'll remember. I think not for any sort of like crowd interaction or big laughs or anything, but just how I felt walking out of that cinema and having to think about it time and time again. It's one of those that'll stand up for a very long time. So again, we'll go for performances. I think there's going to be one person we're going to talk about immediately. So I'm happy for either of you just to go for standout performances.
Collie, take it away.
Yeah, so Peter Dinklage. No, Frances McDormand's just like a powerhouse in this, just like she is in everything. I was interested in reading a bit of background and trivia about it. Is that Frances McDormand was hesitant to take the role of Mildred when offered, but was eventually convinced by her husband Joel Cohen. At the time he gave it to me, I was 58. I was concerned that women from this socioeconomic strata did not wait until 38 to have their first child. So we went back and forth, and we debated that for quite a bit. Quite. What does it even make sense? For a while, and then finally, my husband said, "Just shut up and do it." So the fact that she was like so unsettled about doing it and stuff, and then she just like, as soon as she obviously was convinced to do it, she went like full on 100% into it. Like, there's just, understandably so, from a character perspective, there's just this like underlying like rage in her, and there's only a handful of times throughout the film that you see her go like fucking like full tilt. But it's just her disappointment and her upset and her heartbreak, her disappointment in the system, and then her upset and her heartbreak about losing her daughter. And then on top of that, there's no like closure or answers. And that's obviously what the kind of premise of the whole film is her seeking kind of answers as to why there's no answers. She wants somebody to be held accountable for there not being a kind of resolution to the murder and the loss of her daughter and that. But yeah, I just think she's absolutely fantastic. She's I mean, it goes without saying how good of an actress she is, and she always has been, all the way back to like Fargo and stuff like that. Was some of the earlier stuff that I remember, like, you know, not remembering because I was afraid I didn't see it at the time, but when I've watched back some of her filmography, you can tell from, is that almost 30 years ago, Fargo? I think it was like 95, 96 or something like that. Like, you could tell how good she was then, and she's only ever grown into being an even more fantastic actress. And she got like a bazillion awards for this film, and rightfully so. Fancy standout performance for you, or more on Francis, or if it's the same thing?
Yeah, I mean, it is. Obviously, there's a lot of good actors in here, and, you know, again, Sam Rockwell, I'm sure we'll touch on and stuff as well. But like, it's her show, isn't it? She's the driving force behind it, behind the whole plot. And like, it's so interesting that you said there about how the fact that she didn't want to take the role at first, and then had to be kind of pushed towards doing it, because like, there's some films where you can see, you know, that someone else could slot in and do that role, or things there. There's nobody else I could see doing this without Frances McDormand. And she's absolutely like outstanding from start to finish. Because she won the Oscar, didn't she, for lead actress? I'm assuming.
Did she not win it? I know she won it for Nomadland.
Did she win it for Nomadland as well? Okay.
Honestly, considering we do a yearly episode based around the Oscars, you'd think I would just be able to go, yes, she won it. Actress for,
talking about the Oscar for this?
Yeah.
Yeah, she won it.
Yeah. That's fine. Yeah, I mean, because that's like, it's well deserved. Yeah, but she was absolutely phenomenal. Yeah, again, there's a lot of interesting performances throughout the whole movie. We'll obviously touch on them. Sam Rockwell is another one who is like, again, we're talking about how he's S tier in terms of the second character, or really kind of the third, I would say, maybe in this one. Third pushing second sort of thing. But him is like the horrible, racist, misogynistic, crooked cop who, spoiler, gets a bit of redemption towards the end as well. Is unbelievable. But yeah, absolutely, Frances McDormand show, and she's like absolutely sterling in this. So good.
The thing I like, again, I think because I'm watching it from a more analytical point of view and just trying to like pick things out, I'd never clocked the cockroach on the window at the beginning of the film, and I think it just sets up who her character is. So that if you've never noticed it, like I say, I haven't, and I've watched this film quite a few times now. There's a cockroach on the window of the billboard company, and she turns it upside down. She turns it the right way up so it can like scuttle off, and like that's the first thing that we see of this character is she's, you know, vulnerable, but she's kind, and she's obviously not a nice person. She kicks two kids in the crotch and then threatens a third one. You know, she's a bitter, angry person, but there's that kindness there, and I think that's important. And where, like, with Sam Rockwell's character, and again, I do think it's important that we talk about the redemption and, you know, how people have perceived that. He's not he's not a good character. He's not a good person. And I think with sorry, I'm going off on a tangent, but one of the things I loved about this was the language that's used, and like I said, some of it's vile, but it's because it's about horrible people who some people just use that language when they feel like they're comfortable to. It's not okay, and I don't think this film is saying it's okay, but that's the way it is. Is when Sam Rockwell and Frances McDormand are having that conversation in the police station, and she says that he's torturing a certain race of people, and he goes, "No, you're not supposed to say that anymore. It's people of color torturing business." And it's like, this man hasn't learned anything. This man has literally just regurgitated the shit that some course has told him, or that he was sent away for a week to do this thing because he got in trouble. He hasn't learned anything. He's not denying that he tortured somebody at that point. He's not saying that he hasn't done it. He just wants to get the vocabulary right. And I think that's a lot of what this film is like pointing out people for who they really are. And like I say, Mildred is kind character who's just angry at the world and rightly so. Yeah, you can understand where she's why she's so upset. Upset. What a shit word to use. Like devastated. Yeah, she's having a bad do, bless her.
Your Just Eat orders arrived incorrectly. She's a bit upset about it.
Yeah. So, we touched on Woody Harrelson just briefly, and I think for me, this is my favorite performance of his, across his filmography. I went back through, and he has done some fantastic roles, but I think he gets the right level of funny. He gets the right level of drama. He mixes it so easily and so fluently, and I feel like it's such a well-rounded character. I don't know if there's anything in particular that stood out, any moments that you want to talk about with Woody Harrelson's character, but for me, he was phenomenal.
What I really liked, but things like using his cancer diagnosis to try and get sympathy from Mildred, like that just sums up like the type of character he is as well. Do anything to try and almost get out of something. I mean, he obviously does get out of it later on, but for uses things like such a devastating thing, because he's terminal cancer diagnosis, to try and use that to get something from Mildred is such a I'm trying to think of the word. It's such a dickish sort of thing to do. And that kind of just sums up, again, he's the chief of police, so it sums up the whole force in this town in one sort of action, is that they are just do whatever they want, essentially, and as long as it kind of benefits them. I thought that moment was such an interesting take from his character. Collie?
Yeah.
On you go, Todd. On you go.
No, I was going to say, is there anything in particular, like Woody Harrelson? Because I just think, is there anything in particular for him that stood out for you?
I think the right towards the end of his character's life, I think he's fantastic. Like the interactions he has with his missus and stuff like that, and I don't know, not even just his performance, but the whole build up to him killing himself. And it was just very softly done, if that makes sense. It wasn't shocking. You could tell what was away to happen for the most part. And it's interesting because he definitely comes across early in the film as I don't really very kind of abuses of power and all that kind of stuff. But I think, and I guess it's kind of retrospective, or it's looking back on it when you know what he has in his letter for Mildred, which is always paid for the billboards for an extra month, and it was nothing to do with you, and I don't really want to go too much into the whole conversation, but the fact that he kills himself for the fact that he doesn't want his wife and his kids to see him not become himself through the illness, and that and the way that he's got his bag over his head and he's like, don't remove the bag, all that kind of stuff. Like, I think underlying, there is a guy that cares and cared, not just about his family and stuff like that, but he tried his best in what is kind of not a difficult situation, because he could have changed it, I guess. But he's in a system that's very, like, it's probably been like that for like chief upon chief upon chief upon chief. Like, he doesn't want to butt the trend. He's living in this kind of small community, just wants to do what he wants to do, and then like it's kind of, I don't feel sympathetic per se about it, but there's probably these communities like this all throughout, not just America, but just everywhere, that never have to deal with like crimes like this. They just go about, and like the most that happens is that like some fucking kids have smashed a window or something, and then for something like this to get then dropped on the town and then the police, you kind of expect, based on films and TV, that this is the kind of thing that would be taken out of the hands of local police. You know, it would become a more serious investigation, and all that kind of, you know, it would be blown up a bit more. Whereas it just seems to have been like left to these local dudes to do their thing, and they're just not cut out for it. And that's not really I find it hard to criticize, I guess, Harrelson's character in the police department of that. Yeah, they're fucking idiots and they're racist and they're pieces of shit and stuff like that, but it's just not in their wheelhouse. It's just not in their remit to do their job. So I think I kind of feel, I feel sorry for the guy, obviously with the cancer thing and that anyway, but I kind of feel like he was just part of a system that failed Mildred in that, rather than him personally failing her. I think he was kind of a bit more hand-tied, so I'm a bit more sympathetic maybe than other people towards him.
Yeah. I think just on his character as well, like McDonagh never shies away from violence and trying to like get like a shocking moment. You know, there's at least one in every film where there's like even in Banshees, which is an understated film, and you know there's still that level of gore and blood. And I think he could have taken Chief Willoughby taking his own life in such a, he could have done so many things wrong with it, you know. And you know, we see again, first time that I've noticed it, they're looking through pictures of Angela Hayes' body. I don't know if you clocked them. Like it's like a charred body in the files when they pick the case back up again. So they're not shying away from blood and guts. They're not trying to keep it a 15 or a PG-13 or whatever. But when he takes his own life, it's like with the bag on his head, there's no, like you say, there's no shock value. There's no sort of like, the only thing that I was shocked by was that, you know, there's this wonderful day that he's had with his wife, and she's, like you said, drunk on the couch making Oscar Wilde cock jokes, and like it's this lovely moment that's sort of like stopped immediately. Like there's that sort of quick stab to it.
And can I just say as well, just quickly, shout out to Abby Cornish. Genuinely though, she's actually really good.
Legitimate shout out.
She's genuinely, like, her performance after even when she just finds a note is very harrowing. And then of course as well when she brings the other note to Mildred as well, like, and she's talking about how she doesn't know what her kids are gonna do on the day that her husband's killed himself. Like, I thought she was phenomenal in these scenes there.
Yeah.
So genuine shout.
Yeah. You're not just being a wrong in this time. Yeah, no, I do think because again, that could have just been a character that was sort of like, you see her crying over the note, that's it, done and dusted. And the bit about how they're going to spend the rest of their day, I think hurt more than like not how are my kids going to live without a dad.
Yeah,
it's like it's the immediacy, and then obviously Mildred will feel it.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? She knows what it's like to have to kind of figure out what to do with the day. Just some little sort of cameos that I think are worth mentioning.
I wonder who you're going to go with this.
Yeah, you might be surprised actually.
Okay.
So there's two of them. There's two, and one of them is definitely the one you're thinking of. So the first one is Kerry Condon.
Yeah.
So again, it's this arc of, if she wasn't, you know, hired in this, is she going to be in Banshees? And she's, spoiler alert, not the best thing, but one of the best things. But yeah, the other one is Samara Weaving.
Oh, I didn't think you'd talk about that. Jeez, oh.
I don't know if you know that as well as being a massive Martin McDonagh fan, I also believe Samara Weaving is the future of horror films. But
Jesus.
like, I think this might have been the first thing I saw her in. I'm convinced that this is the first thing I saw her in. And even those little parts, the sort of the cameos, the side parts, they work so well because they feel so realized.
Yeah.
You know, and again, I think that's credit to like Frances McDormand. Again, first film I ever saw her in was Three Billboards. I've not seen Fargo before this. I'd not seen her in anything prior to Three Billboards. So she was a relative unknown to me. But I think, you know, like where you say Colin Farrell was like sort of dragged along with the three big characters. I think everybody's elevated because of the performances around them.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and I do think like people like Curry, who is acting alongside Red, you know, really well played.
I do like. I knew that would come onto Samara Weaving because I know what you're like about her. But like, I genuinely think that when she was on screen, she was like just so charismatic. Like she was like incredibly, it's such a naive character, and probably one of the few that are not really grey as such. Like she's just a naive like kid essentially. And one of the things I kind of picked up on that as well was like, and it could be an allegory for like the whole film, but was like the sort of like power dynamics. So obviously the dad, who is Samara Weaving's partner, is obviously quite older than her. And then also the Chief Willoughby and Abby Cornish, like there was quite an age difference there as well.
Oh yeah.
So that was sort of like what I kind of took from the relationships, is like there's always like the one that's like kind of the more powerful, and it is like obviously the men or the people that are like further up the totem pole. I kind of saw that as like the sort of like the symbolism for the town and stuff. But yeah, going back to Samara Weaving, I thought she was great when she was on screen. She was like just, and like you, I'm not as much a cheerleader for her, but like things that she's been in like since like The Babysitter and even her little cameo in, was it Screams 5 or 6?
Scream 6.
Yeah, like she's like I was gonna say dripping with charisma. That sounds quite disgusting,
That's
isn't it?
weird. It's a weird way to put it. Yeah.
she's full of charisma. She's full to the brim with charisma. So yeah, I completely agree that these little bit parts were just as important as the larger scale character as well.
In terms of moments, there's one, like if I don't get to talk about anything else, if you keep me quiet for this entire episode, it's the moment where the Sam Rockwell's characters found out that Chief Willoughby's died, and that track and shot from the police station up through the advertising agency, up the stairs as he beats and throws Red out of the window, and then hits Kerry Condon's character, comes back down with like just devastation around him and the new chief of police. Like for me, that is probably up there in terms of like I go on about the Clash of Demon Head for Scott Pilgrim and stuff. It's one of those scenes that hits something right in my brain. I don't know what it is. I know it's a wonderfully shot scene, but I just think how quickly it ramps up and then ramps back down again. It hits so well, and I just thought it was one of those moments that, again, I don't think it could have been done by anybody else because, like in terms of Sam Rockwell, and as you know, as the officer, because as he's going across the road, he's got this weird sort of posture. I've never noticed him do it before, but he's obviously not in great shape for this film. You know, there's a point of that, but like I don't know, the way that he walks, it says a lot about him. The way that he lives his life, it just everything for that, including the music, was absolutely perfect. I don't know if you want to touch on that or if there's any other moments. Massey will come to you. Is there any other big moments that really stood out for you?
I mean, I completely echo what you're saying. I think that shot is for me the one of the best parts of the movie, if not one of the best shots or one of the best like sequences in any of Martin McDonagh's stuff. I think it's an unbelievably well done thing. There's, I'm trying to think that there was one part I'm trying to remember. when Dixon, Sam Rockwell's character, is with his mum on the porch, and they're like chatting and stuff, and they talk about like him getting his job back and things, and she, because it's Mac's mum from Always Sunny, she goes on like, it's like a little bit of a, not a rant as such, but she talks about like getting her job back and then like not allowing because just when the new chief of police has come in, and it's about not allowing them to like run the town or something along those lines. Like that for me was like, so again, it kind of embodies everything about a town, in that they're stuck in their ways, where the police are the people that have been there for years, and colleague said about the system and stuff. It's like it's been chief after chief after chief. It's been the same sort of thing, and that kind of sums up exactly why, is because of their outdated sort of like views on even just someone's skin color. That for me was like quite an understated moment, but like important in the sort of like grand scheme of things, and kind of shocked me a little bit the way the negative sort of language and stuff that she was using at that time as well.
Well, it's with Willoughby. It's the way that, like, you know, he's a generally, you look at him and you're like, he's a family man. He's a good guy at heart. Like, you can see that. But even he's sort of so throwaway about. He says something like, "Oh, if you got rid of every cop that had vaguely racist leanings, you would only have 3 left." And I won't use the phrase that he used, but he's like, they'd be against gay people. So like, it's everybody is fine with that, and that's really weird. Like, it's a horrible, like, it's such a strange thing to have to deal with. But again, I think it's done entirely on purpose. Collie, any sort of big moments from you that?
I think like one major moment, or well, actually, there's 2, and they're both like Sam Rockwell orientated. Is you kind of see his kind of changing of character, his kind of redemption arc, I guess, starting is when he's listening to the guys in the bar bragging about what he's done in that, and the way that the whole build up to, like, you know, like, it was kind of, it's not cliche the way that it's done, but it's cliche in terms of it's been done elsewhere, is that, oh, it's the guy that's like pretending to be drunk, or the guy starts eyeballing the guy to aggravate, to get into a bar fight kind of thing. But the way that he then gets the DNA, and then takes this absolute beating, I thought was kind of a big character growth moment for him. And then another moment that I really liked, which is kind of subtle / understated, is when Mildred tells him that it was her that firebombed the police station, and he's just kind of like, yeah, like I knew that. Like, it was kind of, he assumed it, and it's kind of like a throwaway comment at the end of the film, but it's just kind of, maybe he's not as dumb as he comes across, perhaps. And I think there must be that, like, because you're kind of just thrust into the film, and like, you're never you're kind of, it's all post the crime of the daughter being murdered, and that's where you're landing. But then when Woody Harrelson's chief is saying, you know, I think you could be a good detective in that, like, we've not seen any of that in the film. Like, we've only ever seen him be a fucking idiot, like just a racist and bully and just a piece of shit. And then for Woody Harrelson's character to say that, and kind of, and again, my opinion is that he was actually like quite a good guy at heart. It was just he was in a bad system sort of thing. So for him to then say that about Sam Rockwell's character kind of shows that was underlying. And I think him clicking on to the fact that this guy might have been the guy that did the crime kind of speaks to his detective work, but also his like decency of wanting to be a better person and wanting to be a good cop. And then at the end, he's obviously away to do some vigilante shit, which isn't exactly ideal, but like, it kind of just shows like underlying all the like his upbringing. And I wonder if like the relationship of his mum's shown in terms of showing where he gets it from in terms of like nature and nurture kind of thing. It's like, that's the way he's been brought up, is because his mum thinks like that, and he's just not strong-willed enough to like form his own opinions even as an adult, which unfortunately is very real. It happens a lot in real life. But when he's lost his job, and then he's trying to, you know, end up helping Mildred, and that is him kind of breaking himself of the kind of chains of and the restraints of being a small town cop in Ebbing, and being underneath his mother's kind of wing, I guess. It's two bird analogies, like in terms of like breaking out of an egg, kind of ideal. But like that's kind of what I see. Like the last third of the film character arc for him's really stand out, and those are just a couple of the big moments. I think is what I've waffled on about there.
It's
No,
super interesting as
that,
well as what you say about like the fact that we start post the crime, because it would have been so easy to actually just show us, you know, like a hooded figure or something like that, like doing whatever, like someone in the shadows doing whatever to Mildred's daughter. So that's a very good point that you brought up, the fact that we don't ever see that. So we're as in the dark as these characters are as well, aren't we? So yeah, very good point.
and I think that's why the film, the finish, the end of it is perfect, because we don't see the crime happen, and we don't see what I think will be. Look what he's done to somebody for, that didn't do anything really when he threw Red out the window. Sorry, Caleb Landry Jones as well as Red
Mhm.
just has so many short scenes, little bits, and again, I look for the kindness in the characters. And he obviously, when he turns the straw to let Sam Rockwell's character drink, to let Dixon drink in the hospital, like that says everything about Red. That he's had the shit beaten out of him by this guy, and he's still willing to sort of to help him. Yeah, I think that's why it ends perfectly as well, because, like you say, it's that cycle. It's going to keep happening, and I think Dixon is well on his way to redemption, but I don't think he is redeemed by any stretch of the imagination, because he's still a racist piece of shit. He's still got those leanings. But I think we discussed this beforehand, just as like how the sausage is made type thing, about like how I'd looked at some of the letterbox reviews, and there were a lot of like half stars, like as in half a star for this film. And even if you didn't enjoy the film, the subject matter, whatever, like objectively, it is not a poor film. Do you know what I mean? It's well shot, it's well made, it's well acted, etc. But a lot of what people were saying was, well, just because he's done one good thing, he's now redeemed of being this. And I don't think that's the case at all. Like, I just think, you know, we hope people change, and people can be pieces of shit. We've seen it in real life and in films. And I just think if somebody wants to change, then surely there needs to be a redemption story for them somewhere. And I do think it's the start of it. Like Collie said, it's going to be some real vigilante shit. I think it will be absolutely brutal when they find this guy, which is, again, what are they just going after a random guy because of some story that he said in a bar? We don't know whether he's just pissed and drunk, if like, and is just bullshitting, or whether this is actually true. But they're going to go and find him. They've got his license plate, and they're going to go and.
And what's interesting, they both kind of say like, "Oh, are you sure about this?" And they're both kind of like, "Nah, not really." And it's like, are they still gonna go and do this, even though they're not 100% convinced? And the DNA says it's not him, and he was out of the country at the time, and yeah,
Yeah, they're still going to go for it.
yeah.
So again, it's that idea. They're not perfect people. They're not necessarily good people. I just think it's a conversation that a lot of people refuse to have, like as in refuse to see either side of it, refuse to just go like, yeah, well, I get that part, and I just thought it was interesting to see. Um, Three Billboards. I don't know if there's anything other than the setting, which I thought was gorgeous. I thought it was a really a really nice sort of way to the cinematography of it, putting it in that big sort of the vistas with the billboards in the background was wonderful.
I did think the way that the billboards are a lot of the time in the background. So like when they're sitting on the swings and stuff, you can see the billboards and that. It's like the symbolism of the billboards always, or what they represent, always hanging over sort of like every conversation and every single sort of like interaction characters have. There's always that the billboards, or the thing that happened in the background sort of thing. I thought that, yeah, you're absolutely right. I think that's, when you said it's one of the best shot McDonagh films, I'd completely agree with that. Like, definitely.
Yeah. Sorry, one last thing. I've got on my notes that it's nice when McDonagh can sort of take a dig at things that he's not happy with, or like in society or whatever. And I think the conversation when Mildred comes home between her and the priest about those Crips and those Bloods, and if you were just at home but you chose to be part of that gang, you're culpable. And about how that priest, and this is direct quote, is culpable to altar boy fucking or any kind of other boy fucking, like, you're culpable. And that needs to be printed on a tea towel for me. Like, just because it's such a scathing. Don't know about a tea towel, t-shirt maybe. It's such a scathing takedown. Like, it's so well written that it's he's essentially gone. I don't agree with religion. I don't agree with the way that, or organised religion, let's say. I don't agree with the way that the Catholic Church have dealt with things. But he's done it in such a sort of a funny way. Like, I giggled me back off at it, but also such an impactful way. And that just stood out for me, which I'm sure is a wonderful note to end the talking about 3 Billboards on. Anything else? Or are we happy to move on?
No, good to move
Any
on.
more tea towel chat? No.
No.
Apron chat next.
I have, yeah. We'll have a whole line of merch that have controversial quotes from.
Todd's got a live, laugh, love tea towel, guaranteed.
We'll dig it out for the next one. It'll be in the background. All right, so on to McDonagh's last feature film, which is the 2022 film, The Banshees of Inisherin. So this is set on an island off the coast of Ireland during the Irish Civil War, in which 2 ex-friends, played by Colin Farrell and Brendan Gleeson. Colin Farrell believes that his best mate, Colm Doherty, is still his friend, and one day when he goes to speak to him, he doesn't want to be his friend anymore. And although that sounds like the introduction to a book by, like, for 3-year-olds, it's a hell of a lot more than that. So, like we say, most recent offering, both rewatches.
Of course, we did an Oscar special.
Oh yes, we did. We talked about it when it was looked over for the win.
Oh, we'll get there. We'll get there.
I'm sure we will. I can't remember who we went to last time, so we'll go with Massey. First impressions of The Banshees of Inisherin.
Yeah, it's great. It's such a good film. It shouldn't be as good as it is for the plot. Like, it's such a mundane sort of plot, in that it's just 2 friends. One doesn't want to be friends with the one anymore, and that's, as you say, it sounds like it's a book for 3-year-olds. It sounds like it's the most basic of things, something that happened in the school playground. But it's such a phenomenal film. We've kind of discussed as well. I mean, I'm sure we'll go into it at one point as well. But the video that discusses the allegories between it and the Irish Civil War as well, which on first watch I didn't pick up at all. I don't know much about the Irish Civil War, but on second watch I was trying to kind of go along with the video as well. And there's like so much layers to it. It's just an absolute stonking film. Brilliant, so good.
Holly?
Yeah, I love it as well. I think it's fantastic. I had a lot of fun watching it for the Oscar special, and it was great to come back to it again. And obviously, like, you know, however many months down the line we are since we originally watched it a couple of times for the Oscars, see how the 3 of our thoughts have developed. For me, I think it just gets better on each rewatch. As much as it gets better, I think it gets more and more sad each time when he just turns around to him and he's just like, maybe I never liked you, and then obviously Colin Farrell's character is just like, did you used to be nice? Oh God, maybe you never used to be nice. And it's just, it's kind of like abstract and weird as it gets when he starts chopping off his fingers. Just the relationship between the 2 just makes me it just makes me really sad to, like, the one day he's just turned around and just went, nah, I don't like you anymore. And like, that's, I just really feel for Colin Farrell's character, because you can tell that his whole kind of life revolves around his routine, and his routine is hanging out with Brendan Gleeson and cuddling his little donkey. Not a euphemism.
Get that in a title.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think because it's set on Inisherin, which I thought isn't a real place. I didn't realise. But yeah, because it's set on such a small island, and again in a time where there isn't a lot of technology, there isn't, you know, a lot of options for places like that. There is no problem. It relies on the characters. It relies on the actors to do all of the heavy lifting. There's no sort of like big set pieces. You know, there are moments and there are incredible moments, but in terms of like the towering in Bruges and the scale of the billboards. There's nothing like that in this, and it all lends itself down to subtle, quieter moments. So obviously the chemistry's back between Brendan Gleeson and Colin Farrell, and it's just, you can just see it, can't you? You can just feel it on the screen. So in terms of them two, Collie, any sort of like moments. Obviously, there's moments and moments and moments between the two, but is there anything in particular that stood out, especially since the Oscars chat, where you think, oh, that's developed a little bit further, or that you've seen a little bit more of?
I think for me, there's the handful of big confrontations that they have. I think the one that stands out for me is actually when he tells him that he's going to set fire to his house. So obviously that's like one of the last or the later conversations that they have. And he tells him that he killed his donkey and stuff. And it's just kind of touching on what Massey said. It's just that it seems so like silly almost, that he's just like, you killed my donkey because it choked on one of your fingers that you chopped off, and I'm gonna burn your house down. It's just weird. It's just like hearing that out of context without watching the whole film is just like, what happened? Like, why is his fingers falling? Like, why has he got no fingers? And why has he got a pet donkey? And why did the donkey eat the finger? And like, how did that happen? And why is he gonna set fire to it? And like that for me stands out. But also, I kind of spoke on it a minute ago. It's like when he says, I did have the quote there a second ago. He's just like, quite a lot of quotes from the film. It's the one when he's saying, oh God, I hear, you used to be nice, or did you ever used to be? Oh God, maybe you never used to be. And it's him, he can see him kind of drunkenly figuring stuff out in his head. He's just like, shit, maybe like you were never nice and I just was like blind to it or whatever, and now I'm seeing you for who you really are. And there's arguments probably both ways as to how you read that, because at the end of it, like, you could almost say that Brendan Gleeson's like baddie of the story because it's him that's causing all the grief in that. But when he's explaining to Colin Farrell's character that like, so music, he's talking about, like, is it Beethoven he talks about?
Mozart, I think, isn't it?
Mozart,
he talks about, sorry. He's just like, like, who the fuck's going to care about you and your sister, and who's going to remember you in 50 years? Music lives on forever. And he's essentially saying that being friends with him and being in that routine of going to the pub and that is holding him back artistically. And I do feel sympathy for that, but I just feel that like there's nicer ways to go about it than just, yeah, I'm not mates with you anymore. And it's like, dude, you're on an island with like 50 people or that, like max. Like, surely you can just be like, oh yeah, I've got like stuff to do. But then on the flip side, I'm like, I don't think Colin Farrell's character would understand that without giving it, like being given it in like a straight matter of fact like way either. It's both a really complicated relationship, but a very simple one at the same time. I think it's very interesting, and Massey will know more what I'm hinting at as well. But having gone through similar changes in friendships over the last couple of years, which for me, I was kind of the Brendan Gleeson character where I was just like, yeah, I don't want to be mates with you anymore, like, to a couple of people. I feel it's a bit more justified than, oh, I want to write a song. But, like, having gone through that and being on both sides of it, I think it's a very real story, as well as it being like weird with the finger. Obviously, like the fingers aspect adds another whole fucking bizarre element to it, but it does speak upon real life relationships and friendships as well.
Something I found interesting as well is like going back what you're saying about the discussion they had when Patrick was drunk, is when Colm says about who's gonna remember Mozart, who's gonna remember Mozart from the, I think he said the 18th century, and then when Patrick's sister, she comes in and she's like, nah, it was the 17th century. It kind of just shows like how he's almost like up his own arse, like he's a fake intellect, or not fake 100%. Intellect, but he like thinks he's smarter than he actually is. I thought that was such an interesting point in that sort of again conversation, as you said, and it maybe shows, or it shows us that, although he thinks he's smart and what he's doing is smart, maybe what he's doing is an absolute stupid thing, which it clearly is. Like, cut off your fingers, like, why?
Yeah, one you're just like, okay, yeah, maybe we'll just stop. And then it's when he's got like none and he's just punching a bit like that. And he's just like that is it a violin?
Yeah,
His
yeah.
violin. He's just like that at the table when they're playing along and stuff. It's just fucking it's just yeah, it's silly but like very poignant at the same time.
Yeah. I like you said, nobody's a bad person necessarily. Do you know what I mean? Where we've had 3 films about piece of shit after piece of shit after piece of shit. Like I know the look there, but like where Colm is like he's killed a donkey for fuck's sake. Like he's not a great guy, but like as in his head, he's doing it for the right reasons. It's he wants that, and like I say, I think with age, like I'm in my 60s, but like I feel like
sounds like it.
yeah, believe me, I feel like it. But like I feel like I get it more and more, like that wanting to sort of not spend time on frivolous shit, talking about what was in the donkey shit, and he's like, actually, it was my little pony, so it shows how much you were listening. And I know, like within Bruges, there was more quotable, and in Bruges is the most quotable out of all of them. But there's like quotes in this film that like just I like just hearing over, and maybe it's just because of how like thick the accents are, which lends itself to how good it sounds coming out. But like and we need to get onto him now. But Barry Keoghan, who's what is he, 12? Like he doesn't want to be my friend anymore. What is he, 12?
Yeah.
Like I use that now in like just everyday language because it's absolutely perfect. Which I think there's 2 other main characters apart from Brendan and Colin that we need to touch on. So we'll go to Dominic next, who appears to be the simpleton of the island, but obviously we find that he might know a little bit more than Patrick. So like the moment, obviously the big moment that everybody knows about is where he's talking to Patrick's sister Siobhan, where he's talking about would you ever think about falling in love with a guy like me, which is where it's like the more touching moment, the sort of the subtle, the quiet. But for me, him and Curry Condon, who we'll get onto in a second, almost stole the film a little bit because he took us away from the absurdity of it. He took us away from the silliness of it. So yeah, I don't know if there's anything else you want to touch on with Dominic.
You were saying there also about his Horton of 12. There's another quote that he has that like I was actually creasing at, and it's when they're talking about when Brendan Gleeson, when Colm was playing the fiddle and there's like a woman singing, and Patrick and Dominic are sitting at the table, and he says something about like, oh, if we sat over there, we'd have to speak to women, and then he goes, we'd get at them with our small talk, and just the way that he said it, like I was in absolute bits, like it was just perfectly delivered. It sounded so sarcastic, but obviously we know that he's not sarcastic at all. He is just like a simple guy, and the little facial tics and sort of like ways that he plays his face, touches his face and stuff as well. Barry Keoghan, I think, is phenomenal the way that he does it. And yeah, he was like brilliant in what little bits he kind of had. Yeah, I thought it was fantastic.
Colin, anything?
Yeah. So there's I think we talked about this on the Oscars recording, but there's a very fine line, I think, when you're playing a person of, like diminished intellectual capacity, I guess you could say. You could overplay it and it become like grossly offensive, or you can play it like Barry Keoghan does, which I think he's like perfect about it. It's like I don't find it disrespectful. It's not It's not like overblown. It's not like stereotypical or anything like that. Like you say, Massey, it's the tics. It's his eyes. It's his eyes a lot of the time. Like he never meets, or he very rarely meets people's eyes when he's talking to them. He's like looking about like that all the time. Especially the conversation that he's having with Kerry Condon on the like the lakefront about like, oh, would you fall in love with a guy my age, and then what is it he says again? He's like, oh, maybe when I'm your age or something like that.
Yeah.
And then you can tell that she's, again, we'll move on to her, but you can tell that she's trying to calculate about what he's saying, because she's like, I don't think he understands that when he's my age, I'll be older, sort of thing. So she's very subtle about it. But it's just, he's like, okay, well, I'll away over this way then, like, see you later kind of thing. But one of his
there
quotes
goes that dream.
There goes that dream. That's right.
Oh,
it's just brilliant. One of the lines that he's got, which I noted down, was like, "Look at this! I found a stick with a hook. What would you use it for? I wonder. To hook things that are the length of a stick away?" Question mark. Like it's just funny and silly stuff like that. Like it's just like you say, it's so quotable and so silly. And the what are you 12 conversation, and that's just brilliant. But to move it to kind of more the serious thing about like the relationship with his dad, like that's I can't even imagine like what that situation is because he wants to tell somebody that he's being mistreated, obviously, and he kind of goes to Colin Farrell and Kerry Condon's characters as like kind of to look after him, but then because Colin Farrell's character is an idiot, he brings it up to his dad, and then obviously it's just it kind of spirals out the way for both Colin Farrell, but obviously tragically like Dominic, Barry Keoghan's character at the end of the day. So it's, as much as he's a fun character in terms of like his flippant lines and that, I'd argue he's the most tragic of characters out of the whole thing, because like Brendan Gleeson losing his fingers and that's completely self-inflicted. I can understand the extent that Colin Farrell losing Brendan Gleeson as a friend is partially his fault because of how he is. You know, he's this full-on guy in that, whereas Dominic's just this innocent little dude that's like trying his best to appears to be just wanting to be friends with everybody and just like live his life and fall in love with, whether that's Colin Farrell's sister or just a woman in general. He just wants the purest things in life. And yeah, but Barry Keoghan, like absolute masterclass of an understated performance. You know, as much as we're talking about like when Sam Rockwell's an amazing like supporting actor, he can like steal a film, whereas I think Barry Keoghan's always going to be, or at least so far in his career, he's really good at staying as that supporting character, but not like in a derogatory way to him, but he elevates the person in that scene without stealing it, if that makes sense. Like the conversations that he's in and the interactions that he has are always really good because of him, but he's not being like, I don't mean this in a bad way about Sam Rockwell, but Sam Rockwell's performances can sometimes be like, oh well, look at me kind of thing, whereas Barry Keoghan, like, it seems I don't know if it's just the characters that he's played or whatever, but a lot of what I get from his performances are look at them, in terms of he's pushing the person that he's working with, whether it is a massive actor and Colin Farrell, you know, so experienced in that, but I think like any interactions they had, I think it was elevated because of the interaction between the two actors. They were like pushing each other up to make these conversations memorable, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Right, Todd, Kerry Condon, let's go. Come on.
Yeah, well, I think it brings us nicely on to Kerry Condon because in that scene, and I think I'm jumping the gun a little bit in terms of she has some nice little sort of bits, like she's in no way, shape, or form used as the comedic relief in any scene. She's never she never gets the laugh, but there's always some positives about her. Like her character, but like when she's talking to Dominic on that, she's sick of him. You know, he's a little wrong'un who's constantly asking about, like, when he asks Colin Farrell if he's ever seen his sister without any clothes on, and then he's so desperate to know, and he's like, "What? Even when you were younger?" Like he's so like, she knows that he is this like. He is just, because he's so simple, he does come across as a bit of a weirdo, like in the way that he talks about her. But she understands in that moment, like you say, his head and how his head works and where he's at. You just see this level of like kindness in it, and for me, she was very good throughout the whole film. But that was the bit where I think that was the Oscar. That was the moment where you were like, "That's the Oscar-winning performance for me," and I will never let that go.
The bit for me that kind of, sorry, just to interject about
go.
It's when he asks if she was wild, and she goes fucking ballistic at him. She's like, wild. And he's just like, oh well, like he's like, you know what I'm trying to ask, and she fucking like absolutely tears through him.
Yeah.
And she's like, Padre, get this guy out of this house, essentially. Like, sake of him. Like, I thought she was class, and she's absolutely fantastic. I absolutely agree. Robbed of the Oscar.
See,
Disgraceful scenes.
I think that, and we said this at the Oscars, when the Oscars chat we had as well. If Stephanie Hsu won it, I'd be like, fine, absolutely fine. Her or Kerry Condon, perfect. The fact that Jamie Lee Curtis won it is that's not great. That's poopy.
It's the reason there should be every year a sort of lifetime achievement award. Where
there is now though, isn't there? I think that, or I'm sure Angela Bassett's getting one. I think.
Right.
Yeah.
Like not taking anything away from Jamie Lee Curtis, because she's had such a phenomenal career. She is the original sort of scream queen. I'm not taking anything away from that side of things. But and as amazing as Everything Everywhere All at Once wasn't an Oscar worthy performance. I wouldn't have even nominated her personally. I don't like she was good, but she wasn't even the best supporting actress in that film. Anyway, but yeah, let's not rehash that, because we talked a long time about it before, and we're talking about it again. Yeah, and even just that sort of like the turmoil that she goes through, where she knows she has to leave that. Sorry, back to Kerry Condon's character. She knows she has to leave that island if she wants something better for herself. She has to go to the mainland. Like, you can see when she's waving, and it goes back to how dim Patrick is, that like, when he's waving, he's very clearly waving from things that he's seen or read about, because he's not waving like a normal person. He's just like, do you know what I mean? And it's so false, but it's because obviously he's feeling false about it. But yeah, she sails away on that. That's another sort of like image that you could have as a sort of poster that would work as a print for Banshees. Just one of the lines I've written down, and I'm not doing it. It'll sound like proper monotone because I am not attempting the accent.
Please, come on.
Absolutely not.
My
But it's
birthday,
when it is. We've not mentioned that either. Happy birthday. But yeah, when he's on his way to burn the house down, and the woman, the hag, I can't remember her name.
Mrs.
I can only refer to as Mrs. McCormick, where she's like. That's
offensive. Not the Irish accent. Good accent.
Frightful old woman. She says, "Don't go killing his dog." And as Colin Farrell's about a week goes, "Don't be putting things in my head that weren't there in the first feckin' place, you feckin' nutbag." And like that for me, in such a harrowing moment, is just again where he's like cutting through the tension. Like it was just so perfectly delivered. But then it goes straight back to Colin Farrell being like that. Looks after the dog, saves the dog, which, I think is important that we mention that. But yeah, that for me was one of those lines that I had to write down just because it just stood out as one of those, say, throwaway things.
Yeah, one of my favourite throwaway ones was when Combs started talking to the priest, and he said, "Wouldn't you say punching a policeman's a sin?" And then he says, "Here, if punching a policeman's a sin, we may as well just pack up and go home." I did laugh at that.
Yeah.
So good.
So as well, like we'll go for like moments again. Just is there anything in particular, like times that stood out, things that you saw that you.
Before I go to things, before I go to things that stand out, I just want to say, like, see when you see his dad's naked on the thing. Like, I didn't notice it the first time. No, I'm not saying, oh, it's amazing, but like, I don't know if you guys noticed the second time I watched it. It lingers so much on his like on his naked body, and that like totally threw me, because I remember
not 1.5 times it doesn't.
But like, I remember it being like a sharp, snappy sort of like thing where you're just like, oh, and like, not that I was looking for it. But like,
you self-consciously press pause. That's what it is.
Well, yeah. Well, I had my finger over the space bar, but no, like it seemed to be. Sorry, I don't know why I'm doing this. It seemed to be like, like when we first watched it, I felt like it was like quite a quick like, oh, no, and it moved on. But it like went up, and it went back to him again. It went oh, and I was like, where do like? I felt like Dominic for a second, like looking everywhere, but
But when he says it again, it's one of those like little lines that got lost in the first time. I don't even think I noticed the first time I watched it, where he's like sitting there with his wee brown cock, and it's just what his tiny brown cock. Like, what? At what point is that something that somebody writes down in a script? Like somebody, and it worked. You know, it was absolutely spot on. It was absolutely perfect. I do like the sort, and I know. I'll be honest. You know, when we discussed the video about the Irish Civil War and stuff, and I don't know a lot about it, but I just, again, I didn't want to sort of like have me view blurred on it, or like, do you know what I mean? I want to come in sort of fresh on what I've seen and knowing that it was about it. The thing, you know, the April Fool's thing, where you know Patrick takes the calendar down, he marks it, and he's like, "Oh, it was April Fool's Day," and I just thought that was a nice little like. If this is an allegory for the Civil War, if this is what we're talking about, it's how futile is that war? How silly is it that like, it's just April Fool's Day? And I just thought like little links like that towards sort of nobody knows what they're fighting for. Nobody knows, well, nobody knows who they're fighting against in terms of why they're fighting them. They know who they are because it's brother versus brother, isn't it? And it's cousin versus cousin and whatever. But like, I just think it was a nice little sort of link and nod to that. So yeah, I don't know if you want to talk a little bit more on that. I know, like you say, you watched the video and then watched the film afterwards.
Yeah, I mean, it's I don't know enough about the war, whatever's going on over there. I'm not as intellectual enough to talk about the things that have been happening over there, but there was some really interesting the video. I mean, I can obviously put it up on Twitter and stuff as well, or sorry, X. But the video that explains the kind of allegory towards the Irish Civil War and what was happening in the Banshees of Inisherin, like things like it's really hard to explain it because the guy, it's a not heavy video, but there's a lot in it, and there's a lot of like things that relate to other things that I've not taken note of because it's so hard to kind of get your head around it sort of thing. So, but it's very interesting when they lay out in the video as what this means compared to what happened in the Irish Civil War between the Free State and the the Republicans or whatever it was. So I don't necessarily want to go too much into it because again I'd be butchering it and I don't want to do that. But I'll pop it on Twitter so people can have a watch of it and see what they think and kind of marry it up to the film and what the film's trying to say and stuff as well. But a lot of it is around sort of like the self-inflicted sort of like issues that sort of come from these confrontations. In terms of big picture, you're hurting both yourself and then also other people as well, and things like that. So yeah, I'll pop it on Twitter or X, and if you want to have a look at it, certainly do so. It's a very interesting watch.
So, sorry, just quickly before we move on, like when I said they don't know what they're fighting for, like what I mean is the people who are on Inisherin. Like, sorry, that when you give me that look, and I was like, oh god, like I don't want to get into some sort of like I don't know enough about it. What I mean is when like they're literally stood there going, what they fight? Do you know what I mean? They're still fighting. What they're fighting about? That's what I meant.
What's the line at the end? Is it not that they've said that they've not heard anything for a while or something like that? Is there not a line at the end? They've not heard anything for a while.
But then it's something about like it'll start again or something like that, or I can't remember exactly what it is, but it's something around like, oh, I'm sure we'll hear something soon or something like something.
Sorry, on you go, Massive. Finish your point first.
I was just gonna say I think it kind of relates to sort of like the cyclical sort of like nature of this infighting and also again going back to other McDonagh films is a cyclical nature of the plot and what happens before and after the film.
Yeah, what I was going to say is we didn't really touch on when Colin Farrell's character sends the guy away.
Oh yeah,
was it a bread van?
Yeah,
is that a bread van to his dad? He's like, my mum's no longer with us. Oh, your auntie then? And he's like, that's unbelievable because that's how my mum got killed or whatever. Guys, I'm going to kill them or something like that. Like, oh, it's so funny. But then make it a bit more like serious about that is it's when he confesses that to Dominic And Dominic's just like, oh, you're just like everybody else. I thought you were nice or whatever it was, and I thought that was quite a poignant moment. And kind of, I think that's a big realization for Patrick, like that, like maybe he's went too far or something like that. I think it's an important moment in the film. But yeah, just the conversation he has with the guy, and the guy's like, fuck's sake, like if it's the same bread van, I'm gonna kill them just to make me laugh properly.
So obviously, like this is a second watch. I haven't watched it the first time with for the Oscars. This time, knowing that the Jenny thing was around the corner, like that really hit me. This time, it was like such a sad thing to see. And again, like we've kind of touched on obviously the performances, but Colin Farrell's he's got such expressive eyebrows, and like his eyebrows were like such a big sort of like moving point for me, especially when he sees Jenny and his eyebrows sort of like turn upwards, like the middle bit turns upwards, and he just looks like it's weird, isn't it? Like that's the wrong way.
Yeah, he has so much control over like the insides of his eyebrows.
Yeah,
it's ridiculous.
But like seeing him when Jenny died, like it's such a sad moment, and again knowing it was coming, like it seemed to make it 10 times worse. Yeah,
so I'm not laughing at that, but it's just like one of the quotes in IMDb. It's just like, Colm, I killed a miniature donkey. Like that's it. That's the quote. That's all the quote is. But the bit when Kerry Condon comes in, it's just like, oh, for fuck's sake! And it's him like, I'm not putting me donkey outside when I'm sad, okay? And then the conversation between the priest and Colm. Do you think God gives a damn about miniature donkeys, Colm? I fear he doesn't, and I fear that's where it's all gone wrong. Oh, brilliant.
Something else.
It's like you were saying earlier, Todd. Like I think long term it'll become as quotable for me as In Bruges. Like In Bruges has got some iconic lines and iconic like moments, like the shrug, like even and stuff like that. But I think like long term Banshees is going to have a lot of stuff like that, and a lot of it will revolve around the donkey. I think.
Yeah,
I'm talked out on the film. I don't know how like what else you guys have got to cover.
Sorry, just when you were laughing and you said you weren't laughing at the donkey, if you're listening to this on Spotify or wherever, you probably won't see it. But there was a point where when you were looking down, me and Massey were both sort of like going like this, trying to figure out just how Colin Farrell moves his eyebrows. So we're like moving our eyebrows up and down.
And you're doing this, like I was, you were like switching your eyebrow together or whatever.
I felt like them kids off that old Dairy Milk advert where their eyebrows are just all over the show. Like I was just trying to figure out how he does it. I think there's again, it's that idea of like they're still on the island, they're still there. For me as well, I think the Jenny moment was crushing. But the letter to Siobhan on the mainland was devastating. Where he lets them know about the sort of the Dominic's death, but just the fact that he said, "Oh, Jenny's here and she's nuzzling me," sitting by the fire, and he's literally just looking at the fire on his own, and I think it's like that level of loneliness. Do you know what I mean? That you feel throughout the film, and then he's hit with it more and more. Like it's just everybody's taken away from him. And what does that mean? I think that was a big part of it.
Yeah, that's what was my original point. It's a sad film. I think.
Yeah,
like, a lot of moments I'm just like, oh fuck's sake, man, that's just like sad. Like,
there's no other way to put it, is there? But yeah,
chop off another one of your fingers or something. Make me laugh.
Bring Dominic back. He wasn't really dead. I'll have a laugh again.
Turns around in the pool. Hey, it was joking, guys.
So yeah, I think that's McDonagh pretty nicely covered.
Covered in what?
Well, yeah, and like we say, a special episode coming soon, which is just me talking about Martin McDonagh.
What's the recording time on this, Massey? 2 and a bit hours?
2:08.
Yeah, the whole thing's going to be 9 hours long, so we've talked for 7 hours now.
Been a pleasure, lads. So the first minute of Improve. No, over to you.
So if you hit play now, and we'll pause at the moments and we'll talk, okay? And it'll just be you sitting there going, anyway. I see.
Okay, so yeah, so that is us finished with Martin McDonagh. I had an absolutely delightful time watching the films again, and even though they were sad, I again, as always, I love chatting with you guys. So, that was a great episode. I think we universally enjoyed every single film that we covered in this one. So, with that in mind, the next director that we're going to be chatting about is Ari Aster. Which I am going to assume is going to be just as positive an episode as this Martin McDonagh one. So, guys,
it's going to be that's going to be a 9-hour episode for a very different reason.
Absolutely. Let's. So, guys, thank you so much for joining the Lights Camera Discussion podcast. As I say, next time we'll be chatting about Ari Aster. Bye bye.
Cheers, everyone.
Bye bye.